the average weather would send half the RSVPs home, and it did, so thank you very much, Jeebers out there. I'd like to introduce our topic for tonight, which is implementing Agile in Optus, glorious wins and elbow scrapes, or vice versa. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the entire Agile at Optus work group who have been on this journey. Sherry Hawkins, who's our Senior Analyst Delivery Strategy and Improvement. Deb Ansell, who's our Manager Delivery Strategy and Improvement. Trish McNally, our Quality Assurance Analyst. Peter Long, our Test Manager. Peter Zarin, who's our Capital Manager. Ian Donaldson, our Technical Project Manager. And Martin Van Broeken, our Application Architect and Tech Lead. And the lovely Sharon Don over here, who's our Senior Manager, Business Analyst and Design. So tonight, we're going to basically share our story so far. So we'll take you through the beginnings. Thank you. Anyone want a slide? The beginnings, building our framework, lessons learned, which is always the important stuff for these Agile meetups, next steps, and a quick wrap-up. So hopefully we'll keep this short as sweet as possible, because I know in these meetups it's all about the Q&A, so be gentle. So tonight we're going to have, presenting tonight, part of our work group, so Deb, Sharon, Trish, Peter and myself. Unfortunately, Martin has a case of the man flu, so is at home today. So in the beginning. So how did we get started? No doubt through natural evolution, new blood, skills and industry development, many pockets of Agile began bubbling away in different parts of Optus for the past few years. Some being able to function without any waterfall roadblocks, such as some of the teams in our dev area. Some taking more of the Agile behaviours on, such as stand-ups, writing requirements in the form of user stories, iterative development, etc. As this grew, some of our roadblocks, InfoSec, documentation audits, finance policy, technical. Okay. Some of our roadblocks became louder and louder as we tried to work around them. So this is where the PGO within our technology and delivery business unit steps in. And all hail our... What's going on?
Are you pressing the mute button or something?
No.
You're just pressing it, that's the on.
Press this one.
That's mute. That's it, mute. Don't touch that one.
Don't touch the mute button. Okay. So this is where our PGO, I'm not touching anything. Honest.
Try without.
Okay, without.
Try without. Try to see if people could hear you.
Okay. So this is where our technology and business PGO steps in. Can everyone hear me? Just? Okay.
No, there's not enough battery.
Oh, battery. Okay. So our work group leader, who is Deb Ansell, steps in and was handed the golden staff to enable Agile in Optus. So the work group was formed of SMEs and Agile enthusiasts across the business. So the first few months was just us getting together, swapping war stories, telling where we're from, why we love Agile, all that kind of stuff. And then we decided to seek the advice, knowledge and lessons learned from other respected Agile organisations and who were on their own journeys. So that's such as Atlassian, thanks to Kelvin Yap and Nicholas Muldoon. The IBMs, thanks to Richard Dowling, Kurt Solat and Mike O'Rourke. Suncorp, News Corp, etc. And also from a research point of view, we had discussions with UTS, Gartner and the PMO Executive Board. And not to mention Agile Sydney Meetups, who are an endless source of amazing insights, resources and learnings. So I'll hand you over to Deb Ansell, who's going to explain to you a bit about our framework.
Oh, we'll have to have that as well?
Yes.
Oh, God.
Okay, and I'll do this part.
Can you all hear me if I don't use the microphone? Am I loud enough? Okay, good. So just before I go into the framework, I just wanted to give you a context of where the framework fits. The approach we've taken actually has 3 streams that are running, one of which is the development of the framework for Optus, but there are 2 other complementing streams. The first one is around building capability across Optus. So we'll touch on some of that tonight, but there's a bigger piece as well around how do we bring capability into Optus, how do we build it from within? So that's the capability stream that's running over the next year. And there's a third stream, which is around organisational change. Part of introducing Agile into Optus, and which is a huge challenge, is around moving our culture forward and changing our culture. And so we're actually kicking off an organisational change stream directly focused on doing that, because we see that as a huge success factor, and that's going to be a big challenge in Optus because there is a lot of entrenched behaviour that we really have to sort of rattle and to start to have people think differently. But back on the framework, we decided that we needed a framework structure to put around Agile projects. We knew that we were going to be running Agile projects. We understood that whilst we might start with technical projects, actually Agile is agnostic to the type of project you're delivering. So whilst we start with technology in our organisation, ultimately our vision is that we will move to a position where we will have projects running in the business area. That may be many and varied, or mini projects working in particular teams, and they can all be using different Agile styles and techniques and tools as part of their day-to-day workings. And some teams may just adopt a wall or a board to work from. Other teams may embrace much more of the Agile techniques into the way that they work, but it's up to them what they do. So really it's about how do we build a framework that all of these different variations can operate within, but they've got some structure and guidance that takes them forward. So we've designed a scaffold which has been very focused on not being prescriptive per se, not being rules driven, and not being process bound. So that's been a real challenge. So our focus has been very much on the outcome of what we're trying to achieve, and about our teams being driven on the values of the organisation and the values that we need to adopt within Optus. Hence the fact that the organisational change piece is so critical to the success of what we're intending to deliver. Okay, how do I? Where's the button? There's the button.
Oh.
There you go.
Oops. Sorry.
There you go. We talked a bit about how we got there. Beck took you through some of that. So whilst we've developed our framework, we're now at the point we're starting to operationalise it and test it. It's very much a journey that we're on. We know that we've put together some ideas and constructed it as a framework, but the real proof is in trialling it and using it and working really closely with those first teams to get their feedback, because we know it's not going to be perfect, but we've got to start somewhere. So we've developed some training to put our teams through. There's quite a heavy load of training for our initial teams. There's 4-day induction training for them. And those teams, with the project that they're actually going to start working on, will go through that training together. So the first part will be part of the team building, of the experience of that training. And in that training, it's all about the tools and techniques of Agile. And the framework has actually been integrated in that training. So we've selected a training partner that we have represented here tonight. We've selected Software Education to partner with us on the journey. And they've been great. They've brought an awful lot of ideas and their knowledge and experience to the table and shared with us. So that's our starting point. Again, we know it's not going to be perfect, but it's about working with those first teams to get their feedback on what worked really well for them and what parts weren't quite successful, so it evolves over time. And then the other big thing that we're doing around our frameworks is myth busting. There's huge numbers of myths out there about what Agile is. There's a really scary myth within Optus that it's going to solve world hunger and every problem that Optus has ever had. And that's really scary because we can't live up to those expectations. And so a big part of our framework when we're talking about it and educating people is around myth busting. What Agile is, what Agile isn't, what it will give people, what it won't give people. And I go into that a bit later on when we talk about myth busting. Okay. I will do next time. Sorry.
Over next, so, yeah.
There we go.
Who's next?
Darren.
Lessons learned. Yes.
And on to our lessons learned.
Testing, right. Okay, so when we talk about lessons learned, sorry, so you can see this. First lesson learned, don't stand in the way of Cowboy Agile. I'd just like to start off by saying yeehaw. I'm sure all of you have had a yeehaw moment in the last 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, dare I say 15 years for some of us who've been involved in Agile. So coming into Optus, one of the first things that I did 5 years ago, I had a web enablement program, and I was told, great, we're going to be using Agile. And I'm like, great, this is fantastic. We'll be able to iterate, we'll be able to get user feedback, we'll be able to vision together, we'll use user stories, it's going to be great, rah-de-rah-de-rah. So the key lesson learnt for me in this journey is that everyone has a different understanding of what Agile is. And when people talk about Agile, and I talk about Agile, and you talk about Agile, we're all saying the same word, but we're all actually hearing something completely different. So the context of Agile is completely different for all of us. So I was watching this cartoon on YouTube the other day, and this woman comes up and she goes, I want Agile. And the developer says, well, I can give you an iterative development, I can do it in time boxes, we can sprint, we can create user stories. Would that suit you? No, I want Agile. We can deliver it within 6 months, we can deliver your benefits to you. How would that suit you? No, I want Agile. Well, how about we use Kanban? Would you like to do a lean development? No, I want Agile. I only want Agile. So Agile has become this term that's really loaded, and really it means different things to different people, and it's trying to get a dialogue where we have this common understanding. So I think semantics and having a common understanding is probably one of the biggest learnings. Second one, of course, is politics. So with all the greatest intentions in the world, we go forward and we say, this is the way we'll do it, this is the way we'll document, this is the way forward. And then we come to a critical point where something doesn't quite work the way that it's expected to. Along the way, we're managing expectations, but it's not quite what people thought. And then we find ourselves in a steering committee, and Agile is the victim. It's, who can we blame here? Oh, that's right, it must be Agile. Because we didn't know how much it was going to cost up front, did we? And we didn't really have any structure, did we? And where's the documentation? Because there is none. Meanwhile, there's like 6 gigabits of documentation on my drive, but it's not in a detailed business requirements specification. So I'm sure that we all have stories to tell, and when we get to the question time, I'm sure that there are lots of comments here. We're really interested in hearing your learnings and hearing about the things where cowboys have gone out there saying, this is Agile, that's Agile, this is Agile, but in reality, none of that stuff is Agile at all. It's just we want to do it faster, we want to cut some resources, we want to hold you accountable for a quicker delivery. Sorry, what's failure? Failing fast? No, there's no such thing as failure. It must be a problem with Agile. So all of those things take place in pockets all over Optus. What we're trying to do is to draw it all together, and as Deborah said, put it all under a framework where we've got all these different methods and approaches under that framework, and we're saying, okay, it's all right to do this, it's all right to go forward and take these approaches, but let's use a method that's common, let's understand what we're doing, let's manage expectations and know what we're going to be delivering to our sponsors, and let's get them engaged so they're part of the journey as well. Instead of like, yeah, I'll deliver you everything in 5 minutes for $10. Yep, all of it. Visioning. It's interesting, he's wearing night vision goggles so that everything looks better. So one of the problems that we've had in the past, and to this day, we all get together and go, oh, let's go and change the world. We've got a really good idea, let's go and deliver that. Okay, so let's gather some requirements. Let's gather 10,995 requirements. Let's put it in an Excel spreadsheet. Right, then let's go and sit everybody in a room and let's go through that spreadsheet in pain. And let's sit there and say, yeah, this is the thing we're going to deliver. Then let's give that to the tech teams, all of whom speak different languages as their first language. And then in 6 months' time, let's say to them, why didn't you deliver that? And why doesn't that look like that? And why doesn't this look like this? And I thought you people understood. You said, I told you I wanted this, and you said, yeah, that's what you wanted. And that's one of the problems that we're having with waterfall development in Optus, is that we do all these millions and millions and millions of requirements, but the one thing missing is context. And the reason that the context is missing is because there's no vision. So every project needs a vision. That needs a call to action where we're all unified to go and make something happen that's great. And maybe we don't know all the detail, and that's okay. We don't have to know all the detail as long as we're unified. We know where we're going to end up roughly, and we're going to work together towards that end. If we know what our vision is, then we can sit there and say, well, what are we trying to do with this vision? What are we trying to solve? What are the problems that we have? And then from there we can go, well, what would solve this problem? And we can sit there and start to look at things from a user's perspective. So a day in the life of a user, taking a journey, and just getting enough and capturing enough at that point to be able to go forward and say, sponsor, is this your vision? Is this what we agree? And sponsor going, yeah, I'll put my hand on my heart and I'll own that. And I'll sit in this room and I'll share your pain. And I'll participate in this, along this journey. And so when we come to the end of that, we've actually delivered something that we've agreed up front within our social contract with one another. We've agreed to this vision. We've agreed to give it context. We understand it finally has meaning for us. And the meaning transcends our language. It transcends our cultures. And it joins us together in a common cause. And should I say it, in a noble cause? Tau. Thank you.
Okay. Is that on? Hello? Hello? Yeah. Okay. I work in the service operations area at Optus, and so what I was looking at right from the get-go for Agile was all of the non-functional requirements, or all of the operational management requirements that we need to do, or we need to have in place to support the business non-functional requirements. There is not an awful lot of information out there as far as I can see, and if you have some information, I would love to hear from you, because I almost felt I had to start this from scratch. There's stuff out there on DevOps, which supports the sort of collaboration between development and production, but it primarily talks about the release approach. It talks about the moving from the dev to the test into production and automating that and making that a smooth process, so you can do multiple drops. You can do more frequent drops rather than the large big bang approach of waterfall. But that doesn't cover all of the aspects of the operational management requirements that we need to have in place. I'm talking about capacity management, incident management, problem management, change management, all that kind of stuff. So and the music started, okay. So I've kind of had to, as when I say start from scratch, so what we've looked at doing for that is making sure that we have representation from all of the service operations functions, the incident, problem, change, capacity, etc., in participating in putting together the requirements, so part of the visioning section and part of the requirements prioritisation. So we're not only looking at prioritising all of the functional requirements, we're looking at prioritising the non-functional requirements that the business have, as in, this transaction needs to take 3 seconds, we need to have the system available 24/7, all that kind of stuff. But all of the operational requirements that we have that support those business non-functional requirements, as in, a strong incident management process, good diagnostic tool sets to support problem management, making sure that the system can capture all of the business transaction volumes and all of the system utilization information, so that we can use that to support capacity management. So that's where I've started. So we're making sure we've got all our reps involved in those requirements. If you've got any more information, or you can point me to something on the internet somewhere that I haven't yet been able to find, I'd really appreciate it. But that's where we're going from at the moment. I'd talk a little bit more about DevOps, but Martin Verbruggen, who is our development specialist, he was going to cover that off. But as I said before, for me, that really only covers the release management component of service operations, not all of the other wonderful bits and pieces for service operations. And I'll hand over to Peter Long.
Hi. I'm probably speaking to the converted here, but I come from a very large testing organisation that can have about 260, 270 testers running approximately 70 projects in parallel at any one time. And our testing documentation has built up over the past 15, 20 years so that we have a standard 40-page test strategy, a 30-page test plan, each of which must be filled out in detail for every single project in advance of starting testing, and signed off by all relevant project stakeholders in triplicate, in blood, so that no blame can be attributed to us whatsoever in the event that anything goes wrong. So I started having a look at these documents from an Agile point of view and realized that 80 to 90% of it is just bump that goes in there and never ever changes and was introduced 10 years ago because something happened, and now to cover our backsides we have a specialized paragraph that deals with that, and it works to a certain extent when you're running 70 projects at one time, but it slows everything down. So I'm sure I'm speaking to a crowd who know that Agile document has to be relevant to the project on hand and sufficient to the task, not necessarily standard every time. So I've been working with our department to try to evangelize this point of view and working with our process team to slim down our documentation requirements. And it's quite scary for people who come from a command and control type background to give that freedom to projects to define their own requirements for testing documentation. And that, however, has borne fruit in that the management in my department have seen the benefit of having maybe a 15-page strategy instead of a 40-page strategy, because it cuts down the amount of costs that we have to charge our customers. So we've started rolling out some improvements which had been kicked off by our Agile team into our standard waterfall projects as well. So that's pretty much about it.
You've got to use this.
Got to use. I've been told I've got to use this time. Okay, so HR and KPIs. This has been a real journey for us, because when we started thinking about alternative delivery models and Agile, we didn't really think out as far as the impact it would have on all of the HR processes across the board. We kind of knew it would hit KPIs, and at some point we'd have to start to think about KPIs, and we knew that they'd be different to the waterfall KPIs, and we get to what they might be. But the HR KPI, or the HR processes, have really recently it feels like they've just come along and smacked me in the head, because all of a sudden there's a great deal of demand from HR to know more about Agile. HR have been on their own journey. They've had a lot of changes happening in their organisation recently, and all of a sudden they're coming to us and saying, how does this affect the leadership stuff we need to be working on here? We're just developing some leadership stuff. How does Agile fit into that? We're doing some sponsor training. We're developing sponsor training. What do you need from a sponsor in Agile? How do we reward and recognise Agile in our development reviews? How do we think about bringing in new capability through our recruitment processes? And there's all this stuff all of a sudden that it's like pebbles in a pond. The ripple effect has been phenomenal, and just when you think you've got it contained, something else comes up and it goes a little bit further. So we're really on a journey with HR. So the first thing we've had to do with them is educate them what Agile is and what we think our Agile journey is going to be, but have them aware that this is just what we think from where we are today. In 2 months' time, when we know a bit more, it will evolve as we go forward. So that's been a challenge for them in their thinking. And we're now thinking bigger term, so we know that we want to get to, in the end, have Agile included in our induction training and included in all the day-to-day thinking that we do and the processes that we have in some way or form. And we're just prioritising what those processes are so we can start to work through them in some kind of an order. The most important ones that have been identified at the moment are around career planning. What can we tell our resources and our staff about the Agile journey in Optus and the career planning opportunities it brings them? How do we bring it into the PDR type process and in a day-to-day way that people can connect to as being important to them and have it reflect in their behaviours and their attitudes and the cultural change that we want to drive that we talked about earlier. So that's the HR stuff. With the KPI stuff around delivery, the challenges have been enormous because we're very traditionalist in our waterfall KPIs, and they just said, can you just align yourself to the KPIs we have for waterfall? Yeah, sure we can. We can measure if we're delivering on time, if we're delivering on budget, and we're delivering to scope, because we know our scope's going to be contained and curtailed and pared down. And technically, we should easily be able to deliver to time and to budget. So yeah, we can deliver to the standard KPIs that we've got, but is that really what you want? And so they're saying, yeah, it is. But we know it's not what they want. We know that they want far more. And as they begin the Agile journey with us, they'll be much more interested in reporting out of the projects as we go forward. What kind of reporting and the transparency of that reporting? How do they understand the time boxing? How do they evaluate the deliveries from iterations and how that maps back to what the plan was to begin with? So although they're not asking for that yet, this is the kind of stuff we're looking to start developing, and we've included in our training, and we're really just going to continue to educate our sponsors and our business customers so that we bring them on the journey with us and they understand better what the opportunities are, and then they can start to ask questions. One of the big challenges we are facing that we haven't really got an outcome for yet, and I'd be really interested in hearing anybody's journeys and information or thoughts that they have on, is how do you compare one Agile project to another? How do you come up with a way that you can, across a corporate, evaluate a significant number of projects that are running using Agile at the same time? We've had some interesting conversations with Gartner and PMO Executive, the research places, about this kind of thing, and they don't have an easy answer on a project-by-project type basis. So if anybody's got any information or thoughts or ideas, I'd love to exchange some thinking on that and perhaps do some experimenting within projects. Finance. I'm up for finance as well. Finance is a huge, huge showstopper if you can't sort it out. And coming from a world where we're corporate, our funding system is very aligned to a Prince2 type of gating type process. We've really struggled and had some big debates because we're OPEX funded in some areas of our development life cycle, we're CAPEX funded in others. So how do we mash all that together and come up with something of a journey that works for an Agile type project? So you've got some basic funding that's enough to get you started, to get your vision built and to elaborate on your requirements to a degree that you're ready to actually start building and constructing something. That's been one of our real challenges. So internally we've built a model that's now being socialised. It's probably not a perfect model, and it's certainly not going to be the end model, and that's what we're trying to communicate as we're socialising it. But effectively it's about getting some seed funding, so having enough information to be given some seed funding to get started, and then really being prepared to communicate with our funding boards on the journey. So this is our plan, this is what we think we're going to be delivering against, but coming back on regular basis to seek more funding, perhaps on a release-by-release basis, and also being honest and transparent about what's worked, what hasn't worked, what we've learned and brought back into the Agile project. And our intention is to run like that for probably 3 to 4 months, and then to get some feedback on how well that's worked, both from the project's perspective, were they able to get funding and keep working? Did it come through quickly enough that the teams could be held together? Because that's one of the impacts of not getting your funding. Team gets blown apart. I'm sure a lot of people have experienced that. And then by the time you get funding again, you can't get the same team back together. So does the funding come through quickly enough we can keep the teams running in that way? Or what were the other problems, or what worked really well in it? Where were the challenges? So that's just a journey that we're on. Again, if anybody's come up with anything that works really well that they'd be happy to share, we'd love to talk about that and explore the model in more detail with you and exchange some ideas around it. Oh, there's more. I'm sorry, you got me for another slide. Expectation management. There's 2 kinds of expectation management really that we've been dealing with. We've got the business expectation management and the people expectation management. Everybody's interested in what's in it for me. as part of their day-to-day activities and their roles in the company, but also as individuals, what's in it for me, what can they learn to further their career with. So with regards to the business expectations, we've worked really hard to talk about how Agile isn't your silver bullet. It's not going to solve all your problems. It may cost almost the same as waterfall does in the long run, but actually it's about being able to access value sooner, being able to try something, dip your toe in the water and try something in a marketplace, and to explore whether or not it's working for your customers out there in the marketplace, and decide whether it's worth investing in further or whether it's just better to get out of the market. So it's really about that risk management. So we're managing the business expectations and really promoting that risk management perspective from a business holistically. From an individual's journey, their expectations are much more about tempering their expectations, because everybody wants to be involved in Agile. We have hundreds of different ideas of what that means, and an awful lot of different ideas of what that means from a career path and what they want to do today and how they can do it in their business area. So the challenge for us is trying to build the awareness and the desire, but channeling that in the direction that Optus needs it to go for our business to continue to be profitable, rather than having people going off in different directions, all with the best intention, but actually not bringing any benefit to the company overall. Yeah. And sponsorship. You've got me for sponsorship as well. So sponsorship for us has gone in two directions. Or really, we've driven Agile in two directions, I should say. We've driven it from the bottom up, and also we've sought out sponsorship from the top down. We've been very fortunate that we have a new CEO in our company, Kevin Russell, and he's really promoting and driving a different culture, a culture of trust and collaboration, and really driving that cultural change within the organisation that we've been able to hook into, because it's also what Agile needs in order to be successful. So that's been a real blessing for us that we didn't see coming. We've also secured sponsorship within our technology and products area, and with the organisational change that have recently gone on, Andrew Boye, who's our executive sponsor, has just been elevated to Group Consumer CIO. Now what that means for us is we now not just have sponsorship within Australia, we also have sponsorship within the region. So from his perspective, his vision now has grown that we introduce within Australia, and then he wants to take Agile out into the region as well. So all of a sudden we've got this fantastic sponsorship that we have that has huge expectations of us that we now have to live up to. But from our perspective, that's a really good problem to have, and it gives us real opportunity to leverage that, taking it forward. And what we're doing is we're really working hard to be able to leverage that sponsorship on a day-to-day basis. So an example of the way we're doing that is we've just had our executive sponsor make a 2-minute video that's going out on the Agile website that we have, to start to talk to people about the journey of Agile and what it means to him and what his vision is for the region and for Australia in using Agile. We're also trying to get Kevin, our CEO, to do a similar thing around culture, but he's a hard man to track down and convince he needs to put together a 2-minute video for us.
Okay, so before I go into next steps for our Agile work group, just want to put it to the crowd and ask if you guys have any questions. I'm just breaking up our presentation a bit because you're all looking a little bit tired.
So the Agile transformation that you've done, when it started, was it...
Do you want to, hang on, sorry. I'm going to pass this, so...
The Agile transformation that you had, did it start from the bottom up or did it start from the top down? That's my first question. The second question is, just in terms of Optus in general, are you still, is it Agile overall in terms of your IT, or do you have some projects that are still waterfall, or are they changing over?
Yeah, okay. So I would say definitely it's bottom up and top down, in the fact that From the bottom up, we have new blood in the business. We have people who are progressing their own careers, and obviously Agile, if you're in delivery, you have to know about it. You have to have experience about it if you're going to go anywhere. So from that sense, it kind of was, again, bubbling up from the bottom. Top down, as you know, or Deb was speaking about, there are a lot of buzzwords in Agile. There are some pretty savvy Agile people from above, and certainly in my area, which is Optus Digital Media, our director was one of the first guys that was like, well, you know, if we're going to survive in this place, we're going to have to look at Agile delivery. What was the second question again? Okay. In terms of waterfall and Agile, like you're never either going to have one or the other. They have to live in harmony. And even some of the framework we've delivered is about how to work in a hybrid environment. In terms of the split, we don't know. I think in terms of I think one of the aims was to have around...
So at the moment, I think our split is probably about 2 or 3% Agile.
2 or 3% Agile, the rest
At the end of the year,
waterfall.
It's growing.
Yeah.
We've got some internal dependencies on growing.
I think there was an aim by about 2015 to have it about, I think it was about 60-40, especially in our group. I'm not sure about the rest of Optus, but definitely fast growing. Would you like this?
We can exchange notes afterwards, but we are trying to do similar things with Woolworths.
Okay.
Which we might have similar problems when I'm asking. First of all, the first question is, how many of your teams are moving to Agile? And then I move to the second question, that one of the main challenges we're having is the business involvement in Agile. Who are the product managers? Are they from the IT? Are they from the business? How are they really involved in putting the priority correctly?
As I said, I can only speak from the Optus Digital Media side, but in terms of how many projects are becoming Agile, I would say almost 80% plus in the digital space. And in terms of product managers, we're all very, I think we understand that product managers are going to have to be in the teams, but within our framework, we probably recommended that they are in the extended team rather than the core, because we don't want them in the day-to-day, but we want them on the extended team so they can answer those roadblocks, etc., without causing any delays.
Are they really involved in the process, or they're just saying...
Oh, 100%. 100%. Product managers are, for us, they're the drivers of the roadmaps, and, well, the team is, but also the product manager ultimately. So without them, the products we're doing would have no direction. All right. I might just go through next steps and then we'll have some more questions after that. So our next steps as a work group is to basically contribute to these events, involve and support industry development. We're really keen to share our stories and obviously gain knowledge from your stories. So again, if you want to talk to us offline or in a work group, we're more than happy to exchange IP. The next point is definitely around our personal or the work group maturity versus the organisation. We often forget that, you know, I'd consider myself a bit of a gun, and no, just kidding. And the rest of the organisation is just sort of ramping up while us as a work group, we're kind of up here. So we need to sometimes step back and sort of take them through the, you know, Agile 101 before we take them through our framework to just ensure that they have that deep understanding before we start hitting them with our framework. Third one is about Lean and Agile working together. So Optus as an organisation invests heavily in Lean Six Sigma, which obviously works hand in hand with Agile. So along with all the Lean development, us as an Agile crew, we're just at this point getting together and working out how we can actually cross-skill our Lean and Agile people.
Me again?
Yep.
I'll just hold it. There you go.
So there's 3 key messages that we'd like to leave you with tonight. If you take nothing else away at all, please just take these 3 messages with you. Agile is really important to Optus, but it's not a take over the world bid. Agile has a place, so it's like we're creating a toolkit. Agile has a place in that toolkit, and it's one of the options we might pull out depending on what the project is that we're working on. But waterfall continues to be really important to the way we approach delivery across the company, and it will continue to be important. Agile will not replace waterfall. Waterfall has its place in the delivery toolkit, in our view. So that's a really important point that I'd like to communicate. Senior leadership and buy-in and the grassroots support, so going in both directions, we think is the key to success for us. In the organisation we work in, there's quite a bit of politics, and it's a huge organisation, as you can imagine. So for us, we see that as being the bi-directional route to success. We don't think we could do it one way or the other alone. And finally, it's all about the people. It's about encouraging people to be involved. It's about raising the awareness of what Agile is within the organisation and where it fits, not being a panacea or a silver bullet. It's about raising people's desire to be involved and then having the journey to take them on as we grow our maturity internally through our own Agile journey. So thank you very much for this evening. And any questions?